This is Richard Flax at MoneyFarm. And as 2021 draws to a close, we wanted to look back and draw out some of the key themes that have driven financial markets over the course of the year. First and foremost, healthcare. We began the year with one variant, and it looks like we're going to end with another. In between, we saw a pretty impressive vaccine rollout program across much of the developed world. And that rollout allowed global economies, to a large extent, to begin to reopen. That translated into pretty robust growth for much of the year, which fed into corporate earnings, corporate profitability, and a relatively strong equity market, at least for much of the developed world. The emerging world was a bit more challenged. We'll come back to that in a little bit more detail later. From a macro perspective, the key focus hasn't been so much on growth, but rather on inflation. Inflation has come in consistently higher than people had expected over the course of the year. For much of the year, central bankers talked about transitory inflation, expecting that inflation would begin to normalize. By the end of the year, they've come to acknowledge that inflation is going to be higher for longer. And so the question now is, to what extent and at what pace central bankers will feel the need to withdraw some of the monetary stimulus that they've put in place over the last 18 months. From a market's perspective, the most interesting part of this is perhaps how little government bond yields have reacted. The US 10-year yield at the current time is around 1.5%, suggesting, first and foremost, that financial markets still believe central bankers will be able to keep inflation under control, and perhaps are more concerned over the longer term that they will remove stimulus too quickly or too dramatically and cause the global economy to slow down. In a similar vein, we've spent a lot of the year discussing supply chains, whether it was a shortage of truck drivers in the UK, the challenges of vaccine production and distribution, or a container ship being stuck in the Suez Canal. The ability to move goods around the globe has come under significant pressure this year. And as we think about how to make the global economy more resilient going forward, this becomes a key topic of conversation. In the labour market, the supply-demand dynamic has also been very much in focus. We've seen companies eager to hire. Job openings are extremely high in both the US and the UK. And companies frequently have struggled to find workers. Some have retired. Others perhaps have not been keen to go back into the workforce. And we've seen wages begin to increase as a result. Now, those wage increases have to a large extent been eaten away by the increase to the cost of living. But nonetheless, we've seen large companies act to increase incentives in terms perhaps of signing bonuses in order to attract workers, leaving smaller companies struggling to catch up. On the environmental side, COP26 was a focus of attention over the course of the year, even if perhaps it disappointed in terms of the outcomes. Nonetheless, from a financial markets perspective, we continue to think that the environment specifically, and ESG as a theme more broadly, is not just something for 2021, but is going to be a key driver in the years to come. Lastly, just turning to China, as we mentioned, emerging market equities had a weaker year than their developed market peers, and some of that was a function of what was going on in China. Here there were two key issues in our view. The first, the Chinese government taking steps to rein in some of the big technology platforms, causing those businesses to derate. And the second, really on the property space, with the government keen to have growth that was a bit more balanced and sustainable, and less driven by leverage in the property sector. One consequence of that is that we've seen some of the more leveraged and more highly indebted players struggle a little bit. Now, we believe that the Chinese government will be able to manage that process, but it's still likely to be a focus for 2022 as we think about to what extent and to what impact it has on the level of growth in China going forward. As we look out to 2022, we think a lot of these themes will continue to be relevant. COVID, growth, inflation, supply chains, geopolitics, all of them are likely to be important topics of conversation as we head into next year. Some will create opportunities. We continue to be fairly optimistic about the outlook for global growth and policymakers' ability to manage some of the inflationary challenges that we see today. So with that, we want to wish you a happy and healthy holiday season for 2021 and all the best for next year.